Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock here, practicing necromancer. Today, I want to talk to you about cursing requirements. What do I mean by cursing requirements? What are the conditions that is best ideal for cursing? Well, in a world gone chaotic, there's a lot of injustice being done in this world. For an example, an unprovoked attack, say for an example, Russia invading Ukraine about a year or two ago, that would have been a requirement. A that would have been a key component for inflicting or throwing a curse. You know, somebody harming a woman or a child, a requirement. But having a reason is not a full beneficial requirement. Having the knowledge and wisdom is. Having the firm foundation of tools of the trade will come in handy. For example, if you were looking to do a full on destruction ritual, let's say a death rite, okay, you'd want Saturn and Mars to be in alignment. So that would be fall Saturday, okay? Friday night into Saturday, or Saturday into Sunday. Saturday being the dark planet, you know, alignment is very, very good, especially after sundown. Now, personally, I would recommend dusk. The dissension into darkness is perhaps one of the greatest ideologies, if you will, components, even, to beginning a curse. But you'd want to wait until the individual is fully in what we refer to as a Z state of mind. The Z state of mind is when your opponent or your target, your victim, would be in a helpless state. It's that perfect rhythm of slumber. And a lot of times when you look at the best times, and they refer to it as the devil's hours, roughly around 3 o'clock in the morning. But if you're going to go into that type of thing, midnight to 3 ante is perhaps the best time, the meridian hours. Doing a curse during that time is quite potent. Having things like brimstone powder, crystallized salts like bath salts, having black sand, an effigy of the victim or the target. Do you want the person or individual to suffer dearly, or do you want them to simply learn a lesson, knowing that they are going to end up going into oblivion? Personally, I prefer the slow noose tightening effect. Now, this is what I mean by that. Having something that has the individual's personal energies, that aura, if you will, upon it, like, say, a photo, an account, perhaps the name, address, state, um, country of origin, age, employment, even, is perhaps one of the greatest informational tools that you can utilize, especially if you're calling upon, say, for an example, Samael, the venom of God, or that of Abaddon, the destroyer. Perhaps even the alchemist himself, Azazel. Now, personally, I would recommend Volak. Volak is a destroyer, one of complete darkness, destruction, but corruption even. But I would also utilize Alistar, the executioner. And the reason for that would be because of the fact that you want a very well known and respected spirit of vengeance to execute your plan, especially with your intention. This is why when you go into your temple, you want everything set up. You want the candles going, you want the incense burning, you want to be able to meditate on your intention. You want to look at the effigy and really work yourself up into that frenzy. Henceforth, the warrior aspect of Aries, the ram, Mars. Okay. And because you're utilizing curses and the art of cursing, Saturn is the best time from a planetary perspective to place a curse on someone. Doing this, you can utilize an effigy such as a photo. You can utilize something that has their essence on it, like, say, something they've eaten, something that they've worn, something that they've touched that has their DNA on it. There's a lot of different things that you can utilize, but the none comes anywhere close to your imagination. Right here, right here. Your mind, when you picture them, think about all the wrong that they've done to you. That is going to be the most potent effigy of all. That's going to utilize an effigy. It's sympathetic. How should I say this? It is sympathetic magic. You are creating that living bond between you, the spell, and the victim or the target. And what's interesting about this particular type of cursing is you are utilizing raw, untapped emotion. Even if you are hired by a client to curse someone, you are a contractor. You can do the spell work, you can do the rituals, but you don't have that emotion in that particular instance, unless it's something that you relate to, and then you can utilize and tap into that anger, that hate. But a lot of times, it's more about you aligning yourself with the spell itself. For an example, let's say for an example, you want the person to lose everything. Let's say for an example, you want them to lose their job, their family, um, their home, their income, basically. And the income is the prime source of anyone's movements and prospects. So targeting their income, their financial prosperity is a very key component there. Everything else that comes after that is basically like a predator going after a wounded prey. You're stalking that prey and you want to inflict as much damage as possible to make them suffer for the wrongs that they've done. For an example, utilizing sigilliums of particular spirits will link the spirits to that victim. But if you're using, say, for an example, a voodoo doll or a gris bag, you know, you want to put everything in there. Even a cursing jar would do, where you mix bones, animal bones, like say bones of chickens, for an example, because that's a legal way, and you can. Every grocery store has chicken. Okay, so you want to take the bones off. You want to leave it raw, smelly, corruptible, juicy. Ooh, do I love using those? But you have to understand that the big ones are masculine, the medium ones are feminine, and the tiny ones are considered to be adolescent. Okay, think of them as child bones, if you will. What do they refer to them as? Kid, I believe. Kid chicks. Chicks. Probably be the most common term. So you'd want to utilize the correct bone. Now, I'd recommend the masculine because you want to dominate. You want to dominate like there's no tomorrow. You match that with the aggression, the defamation of character, if you will, such as spitting on the photo, piercing it with silver or bronze, you know, placing ashes on it, your own blood, marking it, the individual with blood sorcery, links that victim to death. You have sealed that person's fate, and then it's just a matter of giving your directions. That means giving the order, especially if you are summoning spirits of vengeance, injustice. If you're working with, say, for an example, Osiris, you want to bring the full ferocity of their iniquity into play. If you're utilizing Hecate, then you want to bring the full court system into play. You want to utilize that justice factor. But I would also recommend the Bucharest as well, the Hellhound, the Black Dog, because that way you can actually have them terrified 24/7 because they're being stalked by an alpha predator. Not just when their time comes that hellhound can literally tear into their flesh, their soul, and rip it out. But that noose is tightening around their throat. And it's that invisible force that they realize they can't do anything to prevent. That fear that they're losing everything. They have no control over anything. When you curse, either as a contractor for a client, or you're doing it just to rid yourself of an enemy, a target, perhaps an opponent on the job site. Does not matter the purpose. It is the raw emotion that is going to make the biggest and most deadliest impact. It is so potent that it's the number one key component. Having the tools and the ritual laid out is second and third. Having the spirits that you want to summon to invoke them into play. Third, okay? And the ironic part is, I'm going to lay this out in a way that I once did a curse that involved a Dibit Box. That's right, you heard me right. A Dibit Box. This is a Jewish tool. This was used by the Jews through their form of witchcraft and sorcery. Now, a Dibit Box is known to house a male violent spirit. A male violent spirit is something, or I should say, a spirit that cannot cohabitate with other human beings. However, there's another application here. When you use a Dibit Box, you are placing seals and wardings on that Dibit Box, not just inside of it. You want to place all the curses that you want to inflict the most maximum damage to that individual on the inside, and the wardings go on the outside, especially once you've sealed it up with candle wax. This particular tool is something that will house any spirit that you wish. If you want that person isolated where they cannot do any more harm to anyone, think of it as the most potent binding that you'll ever have. They're going to go stir crazy. Fear is going to set in. They're going to destroy themselves 1,000 times over because there's no way out. There's no way to counteract it. They're done. And when you bury them, you can bury them in a crossroads, say, let's say for an example, in a secluded wooded area. Um, you can bury them in a graveyard, perhaps in a freshly dug grave. You can place them in a tomb, in a mausoleum. You can even take them out and toss it into a river. I recommend if you're doing that one, wait until the dam has been opened and allowing massive amounts of water to flood the river. Namely, because of the fact that it doesn't just wash it downstream, but it also allows for greater movement. It submerges the Dibit Box. Even if you're utilizing, say, for an example, a cursing jar and you just toss that into the water, it's still going to carry it downstream and it's going to float. So that's the purpose of putting everything in that Dibit Box because it makes it heavier. Now, if you do it in the shallow depths just before the floodgates open, you may hit a rock and it will sink. The water will wash it downstream, but water is perhaps one of the most densest materials out there. It's not just a purifying agent, an element. Earth and water are the densest materials in alchemical practice. More so if you add fire or water, or fire or air, I should say, then guess what? You're adding or taking away the density. Personally, I would recommend adding to that density. Think of it as a white giant, if you will. Not joking. The Polaris star, the gravity in itself is like a black hole, but 100 times more greater. Utilize it. Utilize the powders that you have at your disposal. Iron, rust, things of corrosion. I recommend spitting on that effigy. I recommend urinating on it. I recommend doing whatever the fuck you have to do to rid yourself of that enemy. Degrade that enemy and place them all into these items. Now, personally, I recommend utilizing both. You place them in the cursing jar and then place the powders, everything in the Dibit Box and get rid of it. Now, keep in mind there is a time limit. You can go 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you wish. Now, depending on your time frame and how much energy you want to put into a curse, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. 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 2 weeks, 3 we You can go anywhere from 48 hours to 3 weeks. That's 21 days. 21 days before you get rid of it. This literally will charge this curse up and continue curse adding to that potency over this length of time before you get rid of it. And when you submerge it in water or you bury it in a cemetery or you go out into the woods and you bury it, you basically sealed their fate. No more enemy. And then all you have to do is walk away, sit down, relax, get yourself a cold one, and just smile. Never thinking about them again because they're now irrelevant, null and void. They're nothing. I once cursed a church that went into the old YMCA here in this city that I live in. This hotshot minister is known as a fraud, a fake, and a con man. And guess what? He tangled with me. He made it personal. Never make it personal with a magi. Never make it personal with a black magician. For 2 years, I was patient. I pissed on this church. I spoke curses. I called upon the legions of the underworld to lay siege. And you know what happened? He was run out of town. He lost not one but two churches. His backers pulled out. Most of his followers went their own way. His wife and daughter left him. He ended up divorced. And you know what's interesting? When you walk down that street to where that old YMCA building is, it's nothing more than a pile of rubble right now. Nothing more than pile of rubble. Why? Because it sat vacant the last 6, 7 years. Vacant. And the city decided to tear it down. You see what I mean when I say emotion? Your hatred, your anger, your rage towards that individual is your number one tool. It's that raw emotion. You take an injustice and you make it justice. Does not matter if you're utilizing Abaddon, Samael, Alistar, Volak, or Hecate or Osiris. Does not matter. It does not matter the system of sorcery that you utilize. If you're into the African Caribbean traditions such as Santeria, Brujeria, or Quimbanda, you might want to look at the Exu of the cemeteries. You might want to look at Oya, for an example, or say, for an example, Keflu, or Simbi, for an example, Baron Semedi, even, and utilize the wisdom that they give you, but also call upon them for vengeance. Even Santa Morte, La Santa Morte, Saint Death. She is a protector. She is an avenger. She's a provider, caregiver. A lot of people don't realize that when you have assets like this, utilize them. They are teaching you to be more powerful. You see, these spirits, they've already maximized their power. They sit on thrones, they sit on altars, and they have their own kingdoms. But they have to step down to communicate with us. They have to step down to communicate with us, to guide us, to teach us. to come to us when we summon them. We are learning to rise to power. They're already there. We can call on them for aid, for assistance, to enrich and potentize our spell castings. There's a lot of different ways to do it, not just what I've laid here. The question is, are you going to leave guilt at the door? Are you going to sit there and say, enough's enough? I'm done being this world's bitch? Are you going to sit there and go, well, it's time to step up and apply the gnosis to my life? The more you learn, the more powerful you become. When you start experimenting and applying it to your life, you become more powerful. But you do it in silence. You move through the shadows like a revenant, like a ghost. And most importantly, like I said, look at the system of sorcery that you practice. What type of spirits do you have at your disposal? The jinn are both good and evil. They can be malevolent or they can be helpful, guardians, protectors, caregivers. The Exu, teachers, ministers, guides, spiritual advisors. The Orisha, same thing. Spiritual guides, teachers. They'll teach you how to do it. Think of that old proverb: give a man a fish, feeds him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him for life. A man who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it. Why do you think the world is so fucked up today? They're not learning, they're not growing. And this generation is so fucking lazy that they don't even know what it means to work. Everything's handed to them. But guess what? Those that learn to wield the power know the difference between jinxing, hexes, and curses. And I'm talking vile magics. Anything you can think up, you can apply to your sorcery. I'm talking utilizing things like bones, blood, effigies, things that link spells to your victim, your target. I'm talking about a slow, painful death, strangulation, if you will. The more they resist, the more they fight, the tighter that noose becomes. Think of it as a constrictor wrapping around its meal to be. Become the alpha predator and learn for yourself. Stephen Dilmo, welcome to the channel. It's been a while. And it's 8:46 p.m. where I'm at. So technically it's evening. So whatever you preach, always back it up with numerous sources and always make yourself available to the public because you are responsible for the things that you do and say. What people do with that knowledge, that is on them. But that's that. Have a good day.